This is your last chance to leave before I get started, eh? My name's Elliott, and I'm an addict. And, you know, some of you probably have been to treatment. And the God of my understanding saw fit to keep me in treatment for a little over 30 years. I worked in treatment centers, spin dries, intensive outpatient. We invented intensive outpatient in Alaska when I worked up there. And I started to notice something after I'd been in for a few years, and that's that when you get into recovery, some of the biggest bumps in the road that you hit are in relationships. And I got real curious about that because it happened to me too, you know. And we have sweet words to describe that. You know, one of my favorite expressions is partner selection error. And I have made partner selection error an embarrassing number of times in my life. And I just figured I was unlucky. A part of that was because I came from dysfunction. And I've never run into an addict that didn't. In fact, my family of origin was dysfunctional. And we didn't communicate with each other about much of anything, except when we were pissed off. And then we over-communicated, I think, describing those feelings. If you've seen the movie Cool Hand Luke, somewhere in there, the guy that was basically killing Luke was saying to him, what we have here is a failure to communicate. And that's what happens in your relationship. And it may not be your fault. It may not be their fault. It may not be anybody's fault. You may have never learned how to communicate. We have a magic basket at my house. I put my dirty clothes in it. And a few days later, they reappear clean and folded and hung up in the closet and everything. And it's the damnedest thing. If my wife is not there, the basket don't work. And I've learned over the years, when I'm, you know, getting dressed in the morning or something like that, you know, and I'm looking at this, my dirty shorts from the day before and stuff like that, to turn around to her and say, honey, that's true love. You taking time out of your life to wash my clothes and treat them like anything but the rags that they are. And I want you to know I appreciate it, and I want you to know I love you. That's good stuff. You know, sometimes I get paid off later on that night for it, and sometimes I don't. But I've learned that it's like money in the bank. If I'm doing that, I'm taking care of business. Academically, I'm qualified to talk to people about relationships. I'm a master's level clinical psychologist. And that and about 90 cents will get you a cup of coffee at McDonald's. Because I don't think I learned much except a vocabulary in school about relationships. I started counseling people on relationships in Alaska, where they have a phenomenon they call cabin fever. And after you've been stuck in the same place with somebody and the snow 5 feet high outside and it's 50 below, communication gets a little skinny. And we would get people coming in to, and Alaska's great, they've got a lot of money, and if you need to go to counseling or something like that, they pay for it if you can't. And people would come in and they'd say, you know, we have a relationship problem, and I had a clinical director said, Elliott will fix it. And so I learned how to be a relationship counselor like that. And I realized that part of the problem, or maybe the problem, was a lack of communication. I'd get people in, and I'd sit them down, and I'd say, Joe, tell me 2 things that you really like about Mary. Mary saying, see, you can't say anything. And I'm saying, Mary, I'm going to ask you the same question. You be thinking. And he says, well, she's a good cook. I say, all right. What else? I like the music that she plays. All right. That's two great things. She's a good cook, and I like the music that she does. What about you, Mary? He's good with the children. All right. And we're starting to break the ice. And this, y'all, is about a couple that probably hadn't talked to each other any more than past the salt for months. And at first I wanted to do it all for them. I wanted to say, now say this, now say that, and I realized that when they left after their little time with me, they were still in that place. They were still finding out how good it is to communicate. I want to tell you a little bit about stages of relationships, and so you can kind of take your own inventory. In the front end of a relationship, what a therapist calls limerence, and the person you're in the relationship with is your limerent object. That sounds pretty official. Okay, La La Land, the pink cloud, the honeymoon phase, rose-colored glasses. It is wonderful. Your brain is making three chemicals that are real important. One of them is phenylalanine, which is first cousin to amphetamines. We don't like them. Maybe we used to. Phenylalanine is first cousin to an amphetamine, and it's all over chocolate. You ever wonder why you crave chocolate when your energy's down a little bit? It's full of that stuff. Another one is oxytocin. Now, people will tell you they give oxytocin to women to induce labor. Men produce oxytocin when they have orgasm. So do women. You reckon that's it will induce labor much later, maybe. And the third one is your natural painkillers. And those three things are going on when you're in limerence with somebody. You're walking down the street. You don't know that you're in limerence, although you know limerence junkies, and maybe you have been one. You're walking down the street with somebody, and the sidewalk is not big enough. You bump into each other. The living room is not big enough. You bump into each other. And it gets sweet. And if you're not with them, you're on the phone talking to them. Or you go down to the card shop to get just the cutest card that they're going to love. Or you're cutting something out of the funny papers. Now, they're going to think this is great. Look at Snoopy. If you could bottle that stuff, man, you cure cancer with it. It's wonderful. Going back to the oxytocin, you can go online and get that shit. You can get a spray bottle of oxytocin, spray it on yourself, go sell somebody a car, because it makes people trust you. That's what it does for you. When a baby is nursing, he's laying skin to skin with his mama. Nipples right there. Life is good. He's warm. Endorphins are coming up from that skin-to-skin contact, and oxytocin is what makes you come back to the person that you got it from. That's where you learn about it. Then you kind of forget about it. Okay. In the first stage, in your limerence stage of your relationship, it's all about sex. It's all about, I love them, they love me, life is good. And I can't tell you anything about that except have a good time. Because you're not going to listen anyway. And you segue from that into the second part of that, which I call reality. Okay, his ass is a little bigger than I thought it was. That's okay. Sex is good. Communication is good. Life is good. And we're going to be happily ever after. It's not as intense as it was, which is probably a good deal because, you need to go to work and stuff like that. And so you're into reality. Now, passionate love covers this area, and passionate love on an average lasts about 30 months, about 2.5 years. You can get into a world of trouble in 2.5 years. You can buy real estate. You can have babies. You can get married. And we all know about committing felonies and stuff like that. That's not part of this speech, though. All right. And all of those things last more than 2.5 years as a rule. So when you come out on the other side of passionate love, you're into a stage that I call misery. And misery, the conversation is all on the surface. It's just news, weather, and sports. What are we going to have for supper? What's on TV? How are the kids? You can have this conversation on the bus. And there's no depth to it. There's no intimacy. There are no feeling words involved in that. Except I was pissed off in traffic. That's really not a feeling word. That's just a state if you drive in the state of Tennessee in traffic. All right. My parents were in misery for as long as I've known them. I mean, they're dead now, but they probably still are. They didn't communicate with each other, except we all need intimacy, right? We all need it. I'm going to call my old lady and see if she's got supper ready. And if she doesn't, I'm going to raise hell. And if she does, I'm not going to eat it. This may not be about supper. This may be about a lack of communication. So I go home, I say, your brother's a fag. And she counters by saying, well, your sister's a slut. So here we are, we're having this fight about two people who are not even there. And who probably do not care. And the thing with those fights is they accelerate. Okay, I got to tell you guys something. Women are better at this shit than we are. They're faster on their feet. So at some point, I'm being whipped so bad in the verbal part of this fight that I push her. I get big and loud and official sounding. She picks up the phone and starts to dial that 3-digit number. And I start talking. I say, honey, don't dial that 3-digit number. You know I wouldn't have pushed you if I didn't love you. And she said, thank God you don't hate me if this is the way you treat people that you love. And I say, no, I love you. I'm just so frustrated that you don't hear me. Now remember, we've gone through 3 stages of relationship. We're not to the 4th one yet. So she countered. I've given her 2 feelings. I'm frustrated, I love you. She counters with a couple of feelings. She said, I love you too, but you scare me when you get big like that. And that kind of makes sense. For the most part, we're bigger and stronger than the other gender. And not as fast. So now we're communicating with feelings. I'm scared. I love you. I'm frustrated. And we throw in a few more, go upstairs to celebrate being back in limerence because we communicate. And that lasts about, I don't know, if you're good at it, 45 minutes maybe. And then you're back in misery, waiting till you need some more intimacy. And you go home, and you know what happens the next time you go home, say your brother's a fag. She says, you told me that last time. It's just like our addictions, they grow. Push did it last time, next time it won't. It'll take something worse. And this is Saturday night, and the emergency rooms in the jails will be full of people who couldn't communicate, got all the shit out of the kitchen drawers, and they chasing each other around the trailer park with it. And it's like they're not communicating. What they want to say is, I love you, and I feel hurt or scared or abandoned or whatever it is that I'm feeling, and I want you to help me fix it. Will you do that? We don't say that. We say your brother's a fag. Because, you can get an intimate response real quick from somebody when you're fighting with them. And that somebody, if they are living with you or married to you, and they've been there for a while, they know just what to say. They know just where to kick you. And so not much is happening here. And the problem is there is another stage on the other side of misery, and that's called respect, and that's where people talk to each other about their feelings. That's where people share what they're doing with each other. And our parents weren't like that. Mine weren't. And the people that have been dumb enough to marry me, their parents weren't like that either. They were just like mine. The people who have parents that do those things learn from them and marry each other. And it leaves us out there just kind of floundering around, looking for somebody that'll live with us for a while. And so what we do, because as children, if you're female, the first man that you love, as a rule, is your dad, who's not home anyway. He's gone to work or he's drunk or something. But he's not emotionally available. But you learn that this is what men do. This is what you love. And so the men that you're the most attracted to and most tolerant of are the ones that are not emotionally available, unless you tell them their sister's a slut. Okay? As a guy, the first woman you love is your mother. I can't say anything ugly about any of y'all's mother, but I can talk about mine. Mine was beautiful, and she wasn't very present. Her idea of a quiet evening at home was a couple of seconds and a couple of cocktails. And she would sit in front of the television set with a book in her lap, and I would say, I'm going to go out and rape one of the neighbors. And she'd say, be in by 10. Bless her heart. She loved me. She did the best she could for me. She didn't know anything about raising boys. Her mother died when she was 13. And when you start checking yourself out, how did I get like I am? You got to look at what your grandparents were like. What did they give your parents? Your parents, as a rule, give you more than they got. It might not have been nearly enough, but it was more than they got. And first you got to get mad at them, and then forgive them. I can't forgive people just a blanket thing. I have to say, yeah, you messed with me. I love you anyway. You're forgiven. Then you heal from it and you move past it. If I say something that you have a question about, don't wait. Ask me. Because if you wait till the end of the thing, you may have forgotten what it was. Okay, you get into that fourth stage where you communicate, and that is hard because it's not natural. You learn to say, how was your day? My day was horrible. I felt like I was 4 years old. My boss yelled at me. Somebody cut me off in traffic. I rode a motorcycle. And somebody cuts me off in traffic, my first impulse is to pull them off the road and kill them and all of their children, so they don't pass on that fault. And through the auspices of this program and just, survival, I've learned to say, God bless them. I hope they get where they're going without killing themselves or somebody else. And as soon as I say that, I'm done with my anger. Now, those people didn't get up that morning and say, I can't wait for Elliott to come on that motorcycle. I'm going to mess with him. They're just doing what they do. I had a sponsor in Alaska. Mac was a mean man. He understood me way too well. And he was half Delaware Indian and half Irish. Those gray-eyed Indians. And so he kind of had the soul of a poet and the mind of an assassin, or vice versa. And he had the first answering machine I ever saw. It was a great one of these great big ones with two cassette tapes in it and everything. One to listen and one to speak. And I loved it. I love gadgets anyway, and I would call him when I knew he wasn't home. I'd call him and the machine would come on and I would talk to the machine. And Mac, being an addict himself and understanding how this stuff works, caught on to the fact that I was calling when he wasn't home and playing with his machine. So I called one day and it came on and said, "This is Mac. And if we're not here accepting what we can't change, we're probably out trying to change what we can't accept." Great answer for your answer machine. And then he said, "Elliott, if this is you, it ain't them." It ain't them. They just do what they do. And the only power I have is over my attitude towards those people who are just doing what they do. Put me in a room full of people. Put me in the middle of 150 women. I'll immediately go find a beautiful one. And if she's not beautiful, I'll create that beauty. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And she'll also be some kind of an addict. She'll be some kind of emotionally available, but she's emotionally available to me because I've had a lifetime of training in how to relate to a woman who's not available. I had my mama, and she taught me how to do that. When you think about it, somebody in your family taught you how to do the same thing, and you get real tolerant of that. And I see people all the time that are in relationships that they wouldn't wish on their best friend. I'll say, would you want your best friend Betty to be married to a guy like, oh no. So why is it all right for you to be in a relationship with somebody like that? It's not all right. And what happens, we start into recovery, and we've had all of this time prior to recovery to medicate that. Yeah, well, she's a bitch, but, we got plenty of dope. And I can't speak for any of you guys, but I really compromised my own integrity around dope. I hung out with people that I really didn't like. I laughed at their jokes when they really weren't funny. And basically wimped out instead of standing up and say, you people are terrible. I don't want to have anything to do with you. But I did, because they had my medicine. So when you don't have that anymore, you look over here at the person that you've chosen to live with and you think, what have I done? This is partner selection error. When I was 21 years old, I went to a dance at the Jewish Community Center in Nashville, Tennessee. I had spent the biggest part of that weekend drinking coffee laced with alcohol, and these amphetamine inhalers, you can't get them anymore, but you used to get them that you could snort and clear your head right up. We would take the cotton out and cut it in a little tablet size and put it in the coffee with the whiskey. Tastes like shit. But you were real tolerant of other people when you were doing this. So I go to the Jewish Community Center to this dance, and I pick up this girl who was not Jewish. She was Catholic. And we went back to my apartment. And after a couple of hours, she looks up and says, "This is all you wanted from me." Today I would say, hell yes. Did you want something else from me? We hadn't had a lot of conversation. But no, I said, "Oh, I love you, baby." She said, "Prove it." I said, "Okay, get dressed." She got dressed, got in the car. I went and got my buddy, who was in the other room, with this woman's aunt. I had said to her, and she told me, I didn't remember this stuff. I had, and y'all will see, I had said to her, "Do you have a friend?" She said, "Yeah, I've got my aunt." Aunt was about the same age, you know, so went and got my road partner a date with the aunt, and they were in the other room doing whatever. And I said, "Come on, Bubba, we're going to Georgia." We went to Ringgold, Georgia, and we got married. Holy shit. Now, y'all, I kind of had an excuse. I was shit-faced. This woman was sober. But you know what? I acted just like her dad did. So, you know, that was easy. You know, oh, man, yeah, I can live the rest of my life with him. I've already lived all my life with my dad. She was real prominent in my first step and my fourth step. And, you know, the part about restoring us to sanity, she made that one too. And bless her heart, she didn't know any better. I was an expert at talking to women like her. And I did not think immediately after that, "Ooh, I need to get into recovery." I thought, boy, I was unlucky. She must have thought the same thing. The marriage lasted six weeks. And 2 of them I was out of town. There was no real communication there. And when there is real communication, good things happen. People come to me and they say, "Can you help us in our relationship?" And I say, "Yeah, maybe. I don't know if I can make y'all live happily ever after as a married couple, but I can help you to communicate until you can be friends. Then, if you're communicating well and you're friends, you can make a decision that's not really going to hurt anybody. You can make a decision based on love and respect and communication." And that's how it works. And I have had a pretty good career out of teaching people how to talk to each other. And some people think I'm just a genius because I figured out that what's wrong with people in relationships is they don't know how to talk to each other. And the reason they don't is because they never did know how to talk to anybody. And this is what if you're in a relationship, and the relationship you're in is with somebody who doesn't have our disease, they don't have our programs to go to and stuff like that, you better get them involved in something. Because it's not going to last. They get used to us being kind of like a retarded child that you keep in the corner. And they make all the decisions and stuff like that. You know, they call and say, "Elliott's got the flu, he's not coming in today." Elliott's laying in the bed, you know, with some expensive flu. And that's what they do for us. And they enjoy having that kind of control because then I owe them. And, that's not a very good relationship. Partner selection error. They make partner selection error. I make partner selection error. We all do. But it gets a whole lot better once you get into recovery. Once you start taking those accursed inventories. When you say, well, okay, maybe I was wrong. And thank God bless whoever invented the word maybe. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I shouldn't have thought I could drive the car at 95 miles an hour with no lights and a flat tire. Maybe gives you just a little wiggle room there, with your own self. I was counseling a couple one time. Actually, it was a same-sex couple. And this one woman who wanted out of the relationship said, and you hear this all the time. Y'all have all heard this with somebody that you were breaking up with. They said, I want us to still be friends. She said, and I quote this all the time, she said, I can be friendly. I don't think I'd be friends with somebody like you for very long. It's about respect, and it's about not keeping secrets. We're about as sick as our secrets. The last thing I want is for some surprise to emerge, and my wife or my significant other says, oh, I got a surprise today. I ran into a woman who said she was out with you last Friday night. It's a surprise. Or whatever. That's not what you do if you're a couple. And you already know that. We already know it. And for a long time, we didn't know certain things. My spiritual study guide says we do evil all the time. And because we don't know it's evil, it doesn't count. But when we know it's evil and we do it anyway, that is a good definition of sin. Problem with sin is it's habit forming. And if you habitually are sinning, that's called iniquity. And I used to just throw shit out the window of the car. I didn't think about who was cleaning it up or whether or not it was organic and going to dissolve in 50 years or something. I just threw it out of the car. And one day I crossed the line in my head, and I thought, this is wrong. And one of the things that happens to us in recovery is we cross that line. We get on the other side of it. And if I'm lying to, misleading, or mistreating the person I'm in a relationship, it's wrong, and I know it is. They know it too. So you think, what can I do about that? Well, you can start by saying, we don't talk very much anymore, honey. And they can say, yeah, we don't. Or they can say, like, one of my exes used to say to me, just keep on. I'm going to go to them damn meetings that you go to and tell everybody what you're really like. I was not in a good relationship. And I didn't know any better. I thought it was what you did because I didn't have a model for it being any other way. I lived for a long time in Alaska, and when I came back to Tennessee, I went to where my parents were buried. And I sat down on their graves, on the gravestones, and I said, I want to thank you guys for being my parents. I know you did the best you could, and you're fired. One of the best conversations I ever had with them. They didn't say anything. Because those tapes were still running in my head. I had to fire them. I didn't have to not love them. And, you know, I wasn't having much of a relationship with them anyway at that point, so I didn't have to worry about that. But I did have to pay attention to the fact that I had some bad information going on in my head. And I learned it from people who didn't know any better. They were doing their best to give me what they figured I needed. And you know, and I wonder how they got some of the ideas that they got about what it was that I needed. When I was, I must have been 5, maybe 6, I had a cold, or not a cold, I had something wrong with me, I was coughing. They took me downstairs. They got out a little glass and poured a shot of whiskey in it, put some sugar in that, and gave it to me. Got my own little hot toddy at 6. And they were just trying to fix my cough so I could sleep through the night. So I drank it. It was awful. Made ugly faces. They laughed. And then they got into drinking their own hot toddies. And they remembered me. I turned around and said, how you feel? And I went, gave me another one. So I went upstairs, went back to bed, and I laid in the bed, and the bed was slowly revolving. I thought, man, this is like flying. This is great, you know. I'm laying in the bed, and it's slowly going around, and I went to sleep. You know, next day I was better. That night, after they went to bed, I go back down to the kitchen. And I'm getting the sugar bowl. I've already poured the shot of whiskey in the glass. And I'm getting the sugar bowl down, and I dropped it. And it made a big noise. Shit went everywhere. And I heard my parents start down the steps. What's going on? Are you okay? So I opened the basement door and flung the whiskey down the stairs. Y'all, I'm 6 years old, and I'm stealing and lying for whiskey. You reckon I might have already had a problem aborting? And these nice people that just didn't want me to be uncomfortable were helping me to do that. If you look at it the right way, almost everything is about recovery, and almost everything is about relationships. Relationships with yourself, and relationships with other people, and relationships with your children. We were field hippies. Y'all know what field hippies are? And, well, took care of each other's children and stuff like that. We lived in kind of a loosely structured commune. And one of my children's job was to name animals that other people had found. And he was, I don't know, 3 maybe, or 4. And I can remember distinctly this one. We lived on the beach, and this couple came up, and they had this scraggly-looking cat. And so we found this cat, and my son says, "Where did you find the cat?" They said, "On the beach." He thought for a minute. He said, "The cat's name is John by the water." He was, you know, kind of Indian in the way he named things, I think. And it was his job, and people treated him with all the respect that went with somebody having a job that people took seriously. And he's taken himself seriously all his life. And that's just God working in his life. You know, I didn't do that. It just happened. But I noticed that he takes himself seriously, and that's about as far back as I can go with thinking about how did it happen. I, by this time, was starting to learn about treating people with respect, about talking to them, about not taking their inventory, but taking mine. Remember Mac said it ain't them, They just do what they do. But I can say what I'm feeling about them doing what they do. And I jolly well better. If my wife is doing something good, I better notice it. And beyond noticing it, I better say, honey, that's hot stuff. And you did that. The dirty drawers that got washed, you did that for me? Thank you so much. It's that simple, y'all. Now, you may be in a relationship, or you may know somebody that's in a relationship that it's just not good for them, or it's not good for you. Communicate. You can say, this is not good for me, I have to go. Or you can say, is this as bad for you as it seems to be for me? Is there anything we can do about it? I don't wish you ill. I just wish us both a better life. Okay. Limerence. Reality. You got it? Misery. Recovery. Respect. You communicate. You talk. That's all it takes. And I don't want to make it sound too simple, because I made a pretty good living seeing people privately and telling them this stuff, and dragging it out over 3 or 4 or 5 week period and stuff like that. But to tell the truth about it, that's really all you need to know. Communicate. Does anybody have a question? If you don't, I'll talk another half an hour.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm Tracy. I'm an addict.
Hey, Tracy.
If you fire your parents, what do you do from then on?
Do you have good friends that you love and you care about, but you don't feel bound to pay attention to what they're saying? That's what you do. I'm seeing a young woman right now whose father unquestionably loves her, but he gives her the idea that that's negotiable, that he won't love her as good if she doesn't do what he wants her to do. And, this is a woman who got herself through college. She's teaching school and doing a pretty good job by my standards. I really like her. And she doesn't, she had gotten to the point where she didn't want to go to her parents' house to eat because they were taking her inventory all the time, just trying to show her that they cared about her. But they were doing it in such a way that she couldn't stand it. So I said, well, fire them. I can't do that. I said, sure you can. Spend less time around them and treat them the way you would anybody else that was not your parents, but that you loved and cared about. Treat them with respect. And they don't have to understand even that they're fired. I'll tell you a real quick thing about relationships, too. If you cool off, they warm up. If you're either a seeker or you're a sought in a relationship most of the time. Somebody's either pursuing you and you're looking over your shoulder, and that's the way that relationship goes, or you're pursuing them and they're looking over their shoulder. And that's the way that goes. If you are the seeker and they're running along in front of you, just stop for a minute and watch what happens. What happens is they'll miss you and they'll turn around and come back and say, weren't you supposed to be seeking me? And you say, well, I got tired. And you don't do it anymore. And that is so simple, but we've not been taught to do that. In Sociology 101, they tell you, if you don't get along with your in-laws, try not to live in the same city they live in. It doesn't say re-educate them. It doesn't say beat them with a stick. It just says try not to spend as much time around them. It'll be a lot easier for you. And it is for me, like if there are people in my life that I don't really like a whole lot, I try to limit the amount of time I'm around them. My wife and I raised a daughter who's smarter than both of us. Let us know that several times. And she has never been comfortable being anything but an adult. When she was 9, she was an adult. That's just what she chose to be. And when we would try to give her advice about stuff, she'd say, "You're parenting an adult." And we would say, "Honey, I meant no harm. I just thought you might want part of my experience and strength and hope." And she'll say, "If I do, I'll ask you." The only thing you can say with that is, "You go, girl." I'm right here if you do. Children would come to me. Everybody's somebody's child, in early relationships or whatever, and they would say, "I've got this problem." And I'd know probably what the answer was. I'd say, "What you going to do?" They'd say, "Well, I'm going to do so-and-so." And I knew it wouldn't work. I knew it wouldn't. I'd say, "Well, let me know how it turns out." So they come back a week later, and I'd say, "How did that thing go?" "It didn't work." I say, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I genuinely am. I'm being honest. I said, "What are you going to do now?" And they tell me something else, and I knew that wouldn't work either. And man, that's an exercise in self-control. I'd say, "Let me know how it comes out or if I can help." A week later, they come back. "How did that work?" "It didn't work." "Damn, what are you going to do now?" And they say, "What do you think I ought to do?" I've been invited into the game at that point, And I can say, "Well, I might want to try to do this." When people share in the rooms, they don't say, "You should go do so-and-so." They say, "When I had this problem, this is what I did." It works in almost any place that you are where you're exchanging information with somebody. That's how you do it. With your parents, they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out that you've cooled off and that they don't own you. They don't have to figure out that they're fired. They just, all of a sudden, you changed somehow. You got to be just as big and ugly as they were. That's my father's expression. It's one of my favorite ones. "You're just as big and ugly as anybody out there. You get out there and do so-and-so." And sure enough, I am. And the reason I am is I figured out that if I'm just entirely honest and I communicate with people in a loving manner, they're going to hear it. If you're talking to me and you're taking your inventory, not mine, I'm happy to listen to it. If you're taking mine, I already have been there with my parents. And a switch goes off in my head, and I can see their mouths moving, but I can't hear the words. We do that. It's called an ego defense mechanism, selective perception. And I don't want to have much to do with somebody that's taking my inventory, unless I ask them to. And most of the time when that happens, that's somebody that is, I want their opinion. I may have actually even paid for it. I want their opinion. What do you think I ought to do? Then they have permission to tell me. But people that just come up and say, "Here's what you ought to do," what's your first response? Shit. What do you mean, "Here's what I ought to do"? Who asked you? We are resistant creatures. Okay, another question. Yes, sir.
Harvey Addict.
Harvey.
He said, before we forgive our parents, we're going to be angry.
Mm-hmm. You got to be something to forgive them for.
And then, how do we get from the anger stage to the forgiveness stage?
Oh, that is so easy. That is so easy. Because when you've identified your anger and said, "This is where it came from," and like with my parents, I had to say they didn't do this to me because they thought it would be a good day to screw my life up. They did it because they didn't know any better. So what I do is I look at that, and a couple of things I had to do was look at what my parents did. You know, what was my parents' experience from being parented. My father's father drank himself to death when my father was 10. So once I turned 10, I just didn't exist anymore for him. And this was back in the time of Father Knows Best on TV. And my dad would say, "Why can't you be like Bud?" If I'd have run into Bud, I'd have whipped his ass. I can't be like Bud because he's not a real person. I'm not wired that way. And so your parents don't even have to know that you're mad at them. You have to know it. You know, I'm angry. I'm angry at my parents. This is why I'm angry at them. But they did this other stuff. They fed me when I was hungry. They sheltered me when I was cold. And they did the best they could given their unique set of circumstances. And that's how you do it. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's John. I'm an addict.
Hey, John.
Hey, John.
And I related to what you said about communication power and anger.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get you to communicate. You know, just me and my ex are, been together for the last year, but anytime she needs to talk to me about something, she'll piss me off first.
Right.
And it just happened today, just driving home.
That's intimate.
And I realized what some concept is realized that she needed me to let her know how I'm feeling. And I really got contact with that. Thanks for sharing it.
You betcha. Happy to do it. Anybody else? I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here, be with my son. Grandchildren sitting there, y'all. And they hadn't fired me.
How do you know?
Well, you're right. I choose to perceive that I'm not fired. And I had a wonderful time driving here from Middle Tennessee with my wife. It rained on us every inch of the way. We didn't have a fight until we missed the Pennsylvania Turnpike and got lost and wound up in the mountains, and it was icy rain and stuff like that. And she was saying, "We're going to die up here on the mountain." And, the therapist in me was asleep at that point, and I just said, "I'm concentrating on what I'm doing, don't bother me," which was not the best way to relate to what was going on. I thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to think that anything I have to say at an NA convention is important.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Jay.